Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another video. So this video is going to be a little irregular, not our usual kind of thing. We're looking at my personal board here. It's a fish I made about 3 years ago. I busted the fin box, as you can see. It didn't look like that when I got out of the water. I kind of shaped this board out of an experimental foam. It was actually really nice to shape, but turned out it's not the ideal material for a surfboard. But nonetheless, it's my favourite board and it surfs really well. I love it, and I surf this more than any other board. It's a 5/8 fish. I don't know what the other dimensions are, I couldn't tell you. If you saw my short on how to solar raise a board, I can't remember what I called it, but there was a crack in a rail. It was this very board, and the afternoon after I made that video, I went out for a surf, and my epic bottom turns managed to crack the fin box. So I got out of the water, and the glass was all de-lammed around the box had busted through the glass. Yeah, I was pretty bummed, and there was still swell around, so I was kind of really in a rush to get this box back in, and I wasn't initially going to make a video of it, but then I kind of came up with an idea and thought, well, now's the best opportunity to do it. So we'll get to all that at the end, but right now it's basically just a replacement video for a future fin box, which I've already done, so you can click right there in the top right to see that if you haven't seen it already. And in the meantime, until we get to the exciting bit at the end, the weird quirky bit, I thought I'd tell you a funny story I had about a customer and his surfboard, and then hopefully that times out to getting to the weird bit at the end. So I have a bit of a regular customer in town, super nice guy, really pedantic about his boards because he buys kind of boards we don't get in New Zealand, normally from the States or Australia. Things like albums. The first Twinzer I ever saw was one of his, and then this story is about this particular Takeda Customs board. Notice those hot pink rails. It was a super buzzy board. I've stolen these photos from Takeda's Instagram, but I'll link that in the description below. But yeah, buzzy board, so much volume in it, crazy shape, crazy tail, crazy outline. It was a cool board. So he brought it in because it had a paint chip on that hot pink rail, maybe the size of your little fingernail, no bigger than that, and maybe not even as big as that. Just a tiny little paint chip, no ding, no crack, no fiberglassing needed. So he brought it in to get that redone, and it was a pretty easy job. I gave it a little bit of a wet sand, ordered that paint in, or maybe I already had it, I can't remember, but gave it a little wet sand, prepped it up to paint, painted it, cleared it, final sanded it, polished. It all came out fine, no dramas at all. So it was a little stressful doing his jobs because he is very fussy, but it's kind of good, I can respect that. So I finished the job in, I think, a day or two. It didn't take long, and I wasn't even really planning on charging him for the job because it was so small and it was pretty easy in the big scheme of things. And he lived on a street not far away from my workshop, so when I finished the job I was like, oh, maybe I'll go bring it to his house. And I had a buddy who lived on the same street, so I was like, I'll drop the board off and then I'll go have a beer with the buddy, something like that. So at the time I drove a Camry station wagon, so opened the back door, put the board in, super careful, all good, laid it on some towels or some board bags or something, closed the door, jumped in the car, drove down the street, found his house, and his house is kind of like sort of in the middle of the property and surrounded by concrete. It's a really big concrete driveway. So when I found his house, I pulled in the driveway, jumped out of the car. I think he was on the deck of the house maybe with some friends or something. So I jumped out of the car, went to the back door, and as I was opening the back door of the car, he came out of the house or off the deck and walked over, and he yelled out something like, "How's it going, man?" or something like that. And so as I'm opening the back door, I kind of turned around to look at him to say, "Yeah, man, good," or whatever I was going to say. And as I turned around to reply, I heard the board sliding as I opened the back door of the station wagon. And when I looked, the board was sliding out of the back door of the car. So instinctually, I stuck my foot out or my leg out to like stop the board from sliding. And when I did that, I actually ended up like kicking the board, and I kicked it hard enough that I sort of kicked the rest of it out of the back of the car, and it just bounced along his concrete driveway. So I don't know who was more gutted, if it was him or if it was me. Yeah, we were both pretty gutted. What else could I do but pick the board back up and put it in the back of the car, drive it back to work? A horrendous experience as a ding repairer. I got super lucky because his driveway is super smooth, like brand new concrete, so it only really scuffed up the paint on the rails. It didn't actually damage anything. There was no cracking of the fiberglass. So I just had to respray the rail. I think just one of the pink rails, that was it. But man, I got so lucky, and yeah, it was a pretty nightmarish experience. Funny to think about now, but it was one of those times where when I was driving it back to the workshop, I kept telling myself, you can either laugh or you can cry. But yeah, there's only one choice really. It was, yeah, pretty horrendous. So like I said, don't judge me on the repair. You've seen my work before. This is my board. I don't really care. I just want to go surf. And I'm excited to get to the next bit. So if you haven't seen this board before, there's a video on my channel called Panda Twinzer. And it is this board. And it has a Twinzer setup, which maybe you know about, maybe you don't. But this is the fin setup. So I'm not any kind of fin scientist. I've got so much to learn about fins. It's ridiculous. But essentially what I understand about the Twinzer is, if you imagine those two fins were merged into one fin, imagine the length of the fin base. It would be really long. So having a fin base that long is going to create a huge wall of resistance for the water. Every time you're turning, the water's meeting this massive wall. So by putting this little canard fin, they call it, on the Twinzer setup next to your regular keel, or in that Twinzer's case, it's sort of an upright keel, but you're essentially extending the fin's base, but because it's broken up into two fins, it allows more water to flow and wrap around the foils of them, so it doesn't have the same resistance as if you just had one really long-based fin. That's kind of how I understand it. But the big difference I've noticed between the fish and the Twinzer, which, yes, the Twinzer is much narrower than the fish, different fin placement, all that. But the big difference I've noticed is backside bottom turn. So I surf regular, so left is my backside. And the best way I can describe it is pretty typical of a fish. My backside bottom turn feels like I'm skating in the wet. So I'm real careful about how I turn because the board has a tendency to slip or to slide out. And it's the complete opposite with the Twinzer. On the backside, it has the hold of a thruster essentially. The board surfs like a twin fin. I don't have to have my feet over the fins to surf it or to turn it. It's pretty alive. But on the backside bottom turn especially, I can really push into it and get some pump and some drive out of that turn. With the fish, it's impossible. So my theory was, if I set the fish up as a Twinzer, will it have the same effect? Will it make it less icy or give me more traction like I'm skating in the dry on that backside bottom turn? I've had 3 surfs on this board since it was a Twinzer setup. On the front side, it's totally changed the board. So I think what's happened is by basically extending the fin base, I've kind of moved the fins further forward towards the nose of the board. So my pivot point of my fins are further forward. So on the front side, it's made it really twitchy. It's almost loosened the trucks. Sorry, I go back to skateboarding every time. But instead of it wanting to do big, drawn out, archy kind of carves, it kind of wants to go vertical. Even if I don't have the ability to send it vertical, that's the way it wants to go. And on the back side, I've noticed that it does have way more hold. So on that bottom turn, it feels like I'm skating in the dry. I haven't had any issues with it sliding or it slipping out, so it seems to have created more hold. But once I'm on the face of the wave, it kind of feels how the front side used to feel with just the regular twin fin setup. It wants to do kind of drawn out carves, but also backside is not my strong point, I have to say. So the conclusion I've come to granted only after 3 surfs, 2 surfs in pretty good waves and 1 surf in pretty average waves. If I was going to surf a wave that was really fast, you kind of drop, you want to pump as much speed down the line as you can before the whole thing shuts down on you, I'd probably take the canards out and keep it as a regular 20. Maybe if it was only a left in those conditions, a backside, I'd maybe keep the canards in. I'm not really sure at this point. I need to try it more. But if it was a slower wave and with a bit of a face to play on, I would probably keep those canards in, just because it just feels so much more alive. Yeah, I don't know really how to explain it, if I'm honest, but there's just so much more options for lines than a traditional fish setup, I think. So yeah, that's kind of the story behind the Twinzer. I'll keep you updated if you want, and yeah, I'm pretty stoked I did it, if I'm honest. It's given this board a lot more options and a lot more life. So minus the mini male, my entire quiver now has Twinzer setup, but with the ability or the option to take out the canard fins, so just revert them back to normal 20s. And changing fins is a way cheaper way to sort of give new life to a surfboard and yeah, mix things up than buying a brand new board. So if you've got an old fish or an old twin fin and you kind of know how it surfs, at this point I can recommend taking that board to your ding repairer and asking them to put a couple of plugs in, making up a couple of canard fins, and see what you think. That's it, guys. Thanks very much for watching once again, and hope you had a laugh at my expense, and yeah, we'll see you in the next one. Hit the subscribe button. Chee-hoo!